So today we're joined by Laurent Balague, CEO and co-founder of Formetris. Laurent, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me on your podcast.
So we're so excited to talk to you today. You know, this season, what we've been doing is focusing on setting up for success when you're getting a new learning platform or when you're launching a new strategy. And with Formetris having such a deep knowledge and experience in the measurement space, we wanted to kind of kick off by asking you, how important is measurement within enterprise learning?
Well, for me, it's the equivalent question to how important is measurement is how important is reaching a high performance on what you do as an organization, as a team, as a function. So yeah, it's critical. Measuring allows you to prove and to improve your performance. So for both these reasons and many others, it's absolutely critical.
Great. So what would you say that companies can do early on to set themselves up for success in terms of measurements?
Then there are two ways, to understand your question is regarding at the program level or at a more global level, typically when they install a new learning platform. But in both situations, I would say the reasoning is the same. Before doing anything, you must know how you will measure your success. You must define what will be success for you, for your internal clients, for all the sponsors of what you do. This is true at the program level. Let's say your internal L&D, you have internal clients who expect you to help them achieve higher sales, better quality, better client satisfaction, etc., etc. So you have a business objective that you need to translate into skills and behavior objectives, and that will end up, defining a learning program. That normally should be done before you even start designing the program. And it's the same when you install a learning platform. Why do you do that? How will you and your clients and the people financing the project will measure that the project is a success? So that should be something defined in the first step of the project.
When it comes to that sort of defining what it really means, how important is that sort of executive level buy-in and the executive level involvement and understanding how you're measuring?
It is absolutely critical because there once again at program level there is a common myth shared by many people is that training is magical. Is that it's a magic wand. When you don't know how to improve a situation, well, you call the training department, and a learning program is a magic wand. And on Monday morning they don't know, and on Monday evening they are perfectly capable of doing what they were not able to do a few weeks or a few days ago. Unfortunately, it only happens on Matrix, the movie, where Keanu Reeves learns kung fu in a few minutes. In the real life, it doesn't happen that way. So there are many illusions about the capacity that learning can do on a short-term basis without the involvement of other functions. So this is why they have to really engage your internal clients, the executives, on what they really expect and sort of having a contract between you, L&D department, and them. And it's true when it's internal, and it's also true when you're a training organization selling training or other things to outside clients. But in both situations, you need really to have a detailed contract that will start by the business objectives, but also detail what the learning share will be precisely.
Would you be able to share with us some of those best practices, maybe if that's for so you plan something out, or how you should expect the metrics to come in, or how you're going to spread them, whatever that would be?
Oh yeah. So the list could be long, but first I'm still a big fan of the Kirkpatrick scale.
Okay.
And I know it's from the 50s, from the previous century. So because it's so old, it looks suspicious. And it's true that this scale is not scientifically perfect. But the great thing of this scale is that everybody understands it. Level 1, their reaction, satisfaction, engagement. Level 2, we are talking about what people learned in terms of knowledge, skills. Level 3 is transfer, what they do from what they've learned. So we are now talking about performance observed on the daily job. And level 4, it's impact in terms of business and all the operational KPIs. This, every executive will understand it in 5 minutes. So a best practice is typically to explain that chain of consequences so that they understand that from learning to business impact, there is a different steps. So that's a first thing. The second thing is that no matter what L&D professionals say, in their DNA, they're obsessed by satisfaction. So, and we have to admit that. We have to recognize that, this is a natural trend. And it's funny because I do a lot of training and conferences on the importance of learning impact. But when I do, facilitate and organize this training, my obsession is that people laugh at my jokes and that people will be very happy at the end of the day. So even though I'm saying the opposite, I'm saying, you should not focus on satisfaction. But me as a trainer, this is the only thing that matters, at least in that special day. Then, of course, I intend to sell some things, but that will be later.
Yeah.
So it's important also to recognize that it's very hard to have an impact-focused learning organization because of all the history, because of this natural tendency to focus on satisfaction by all the stakeholders. Even the CEOs, actually, when CEOs are in the classroom, they're obsessed by satisfaction, and the rest doesn't really matter.
So when organizations are kind of ready to take that plunge and say, okay, I'm going to really focus in on measuring this learning impact, what do you think is one thing that people often forget when it comes to that measurement that they probably shouldn't?
Okay, another thing is that you, because of what I said earlier, learning organizations will not have enough time to deal with learning impact on all courses, at least at a very ambitious level. So you need to be pragmatic. Because most of L&D time is spent on the future program to design, to roll out. Looking backward is necessary to measure. You need the learning to happen first, and then you can measure some things. So with the little time that learning teams have, they need to have what I describe as an 80-20 approach. We know that they will spend 80% of their time and resources on the top 20% of the programs, the most critical for them, for their organization. So for these programs, they need to be more ambitious and really have a detailed measurement strategy to really build the chain of evidence, what people learn, how it affects their daily work, and in the end, the consequence in terms of business. And something very detailed so that the continuous improvement process will start very early on at the pilot phase of the project, and then they will have enough data and stories to come back to their internal sponsors or their external clients. For the remaining 80%, you still can go beyond satisfaction, but on a more automated and scalable way. So really having two different measurement strategies for these two types of programs. That's one of the best practices we strongly recommend.
Okay, so I have a little scenario for you. If you were to launch a learning project in, say, the next few months, what would be the first three things that you would make sure that you could, definitely track accurately?
Okay, well, let's. If I don't have any more specific, I will be still, general. But I would say, who is sponsoring the project? Who is who is the top boss, the top stakeholder of the project, and what is his or her vision of the program success? That would be point number one. And that's important for the project, and that's important for my personal future. Second one is what is expected concretely of this learning program to achieve the overall project. That's important. So that will allow to build the contract I was talking about between the learning team and this sponsor. And the third is really a clear vision of the time. When the program is expected to start, how much time do I have between the first pilot and the rollout? Is it possible to have enough time and data to improve it at that phase, or is it just an instant rollout, meaning that I won't have time to consider any continuous improvement process? That was probably the third thing I would look at. And with that, I can define a measurement strategy.
Right. And having those sort of three things in place are your foundation to be able to measure, to figure out how to put together that strategy, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So what if there's one thing, what makes a really great organization stand out from the rest when it comes to measuring their impact? Is there kind of one thing that you've seen that really says, okay, this is what's elevating this organization over perhaps their competitors?
Yes, it's the capacity to use data. It's not. I don't measure the performance in terms of metrics of an L&D organization on the quantity and the quality of data they collect. Is what they do with it.
Mm-hmm.
If you can prove the business impact of all your courses, but you never act on it, you should do something else because you're losing your time. Yeah. And on the opposite, you just collect satisfaction, but you're super reactive, and you actually do a lot to improve all the sessions based on that. While the second case is better. So for me, what is more important is what you do from the data you collect than the data you collect. Of course, in an ideal situation, if you use typically a solution like ours, you can do both. But the worst situation is to annoy people to collect data, to ask for feedback. Let's say you ask the managers for feedback, but you never do anything from that. That would be worse than doing nothing.
So what are some of the things that you've seen organizations, those high-performing organizations, do with the data? Can you give us some examples that our listeners can take away and say, okay, maybe this is what I need to be starting to do with that data that I collect?
Yes. So first, enrich, have a strong continuous improvement inside the L&D, and having defined the clearly the accountability. Who is in charge of collecting the data, looking at the data, treating, initiating actions to improve and to correct, maybe to come back to your clients if you're a training provider. So that is absolutely critical. That's a real best practice, is to really have clearly a quality process defined, operational, and have defined accountability very precisely. The other thing is what I mentioned earlier is an 80-20 approach. So don't launch the same evaluation every time. Take into consideration the importance of a specific course. A third thing, I would also make sure that the way you engage typically the learners and their managers, make the evaluation process also useful for them. So that's another topic, is that, of course, you collect data on learning, on behavior change, on skills, on performance improvement, to achieve what I said in the introduction, to prove and improve the impact of all your learning programs. But doing so, it's also possible to make all this data collection process, and typically the surveys and the assessments that you will initiate at the learner level and the manager level, to make all this process also useful for the learners and for their managers. So turning the evaluation into something that will become useful for the learners. I will give you an example. Asking the learners what they intend to do. You collect some insights on the satisfaction, what went well and what didn't go well, but also ask them, okay, what do you plan to do from everything you've learned? And sending this list of commitments, this action plan to their manager to say, okay, John has recently attended this communication program, and John intends to do this and this in the coming weeks. Please help him. It's a very simple thing, but that can be extremely helpful for the learners and for the manager, so that the manager can do the role of helping, putting his team into a situation of applying what they've learned, and facilitating the learning transfer and the application of learning. And then with the same action plan, coming back to both a few months later and say to the learner and to the manager, okay, has this list of actions been done or not? That is a way to measure the actual, so Kirkpatrick level 3, to take this example, or the actual application of learning, but turning into something that will increase the accountability of the learner, the manager, and in the end, actually improve the impact of the course.
The feedback loop is so important, isn't it? With learning measurement, is the actual making sure you're circling back and saying, okay, we did put this in place. We wanted to achieve this. And I think oftentimes what I've seen is that some organizations maybe don't look back and say, oh, we actually did do this or didn't do this, or here's an area that we need to improve.
Absolutely. So so there are different levels in the feedback. So first, as it's what I said earlier, is that you collect data, but then after the data collection and the data analysis, there must be actions to improve the course, to improve the content in the LMS, to improve the next sessions if it's an ILT or VLT. The feedback also should be also directed at the people who gave the feedback. So the learners, the managers, maybe the trainers. And then finally, and this is the most critical for L&D organization, coming back to the sponsors, coming back to all the other functions. I said that measurement is used to prove and improve your performance, but there is something in the middle. Is also prove that you improve your performance, and that's communication. And it's political, but it's critical for L&D organization to show that even though they are one of the softer functions of an organization, they also apply quality rules, quality processes, and they put also some constraints and measurement strategy. And in the end, there is a permanent improvement of their performance, their content, etc. And communicating on that is also critical.
You've given us some fantastic takeaways there, but I wonder if there's any other kind of best practices or tips that our listeners can maybe take away from this.
Well, I will open another field because at this stage I've been focusing on the formal learning. But you're from Docebo, so you know that learning can happen in something less formal where you just have a platform and you learn what you want when you want. From whoever you want in the organization outside. And then the whole measurement strategy becomes much, much trickier because the internal sponsor is no longer here. It's just an individual doing something from the platform that was available. And for this, the whole measurement strategy has to be redefined. Kirkpatrick doesn't apply anymore.
Okay.
Because there are no business objectives. And that we've been working on that. This is a new generation of analytics. It's possible to measure things, but it's very different. It's a totally different philosophy and methodology. We focus on learning culture on our side to measure the dynamic of the daily learning at the team level, at the skill level, to see what works well, in what situation, what countries, what teams, what functions. There is a real dynamic, let's say, on job-related topics or on technical topics or on soft skills or on management, and where this is actually not as intense, and helping our clients to improve that and to find the levers to improve this learning culture. So this is a new world of analytics, a new world of measurement, but becoming more and more central for learning organizations.
And have you seen some best practices for those organizations that are starting to figure out the best ways to measure that social learning and those in the flow of work kind of discover your own learning opportunities?
You say best practice in terms of measurement? Was it your question?
Yeah, when it comes to social learning.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So yes, of course you can look at the LMS data. And, talking to an LMS team, I won't say this is not something that people should not do. But this is not sufficient. The best technology for social learning is the coffee machine. It's not the LMS. And sadly, we live in a world when the coffee machine doesn't work. The LMS still works and is probably overloaded by, requests. But the coffee machines are desperately alone in offices worldwide. And this is very sad, and it shows that social learning has dramatically be damaged by the current crisis. Even though the technology and the online content has never been so rich and so diverse. So the measurement strategy has also to reach beyond the basic and the standard learning technologies, because most of the learning happens outside. So you need to take that into consideration to really measure the reality of the daily learning, informal learning, social learning. This is why we've developed a new approach to measure this learning culture, mimicking the engagement surveys. So it's a quick survey that can be launched at a very large level. We've done that with many clients so far globally, so that we do not have dead corners. We are sure to monitor the reality and not being trumped by just one technology, while actually people share on Slack what I thought it would be on LMS, or they use Teams and nobody was aware of that, and so on and so on.
That makes so much sense, and we really appreciate all of your insight today, Laurent. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Have a great day and a good weekend.
You too. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
For more information on what we've discussed today, including links to resources and downloadable assets, go to docebo.com/podcast. That's docebo.com/podcast. And subscribe to our newsletter.
You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify, and all other places where you get your podcasts by searching Learning Elevated. So don't forget to click subscribe so you know when we're disembarking on another floor.